With EA Sports College Football coming back, one of the biggest fears I see online about this game is that they don't want it to be a reskin of Madden. Now, I haven't been a consistent customer of EA's for quite some time, as I felt that the effort that they put into their sports titles on the 8th generation of consoles definitely did not deserve the $60 price tag that they had at release. And I just picked up Madden 24 recently on my PC, but my entire purpose of doing that was playing it with the mods. While that game is far from perfect, I can at least get through a full game without rage quitting and having to turn the game off, but trusting to believe that gameplay still needs some work. And we all tend to forget what the sentiment towards NCAA 14 was at launch, as we hold that game in such high esteem now, some going to the point of even saying it was the last good football game EA even made. But we all know how the saying goes, you don't truly appreciate something until it's gone. NCAA 14 is still one of my favorite games of all time, and it has held up very well over the last 11 years, but even with the updates and changes we got with the revamp mod, the game just can't overcome some of the oversights that were missed during the development cycle. And I said all that just to get to this point right here. This game series is supposed to be a simulation of the college football universe as we see it or desire to build it, but nothing snatches you back to reality faster than when the immersion within that simulation is broken. Imagine watching your favorite show. Anime probably works best for this example, and you see a new character pop up in the show, but the voice actor for the main character is also voicing the new one, but doesn't change his tone of voice at all. Or some side character that was completely irrelevant to the story just shows up to fight the main villain with a new power up, but it's never explained why or how it happened. You would never be able to watch that show again without noticing it. Now, I trust that things like crowd noise and reactions and repetitive commentary will be taken care of based on the passion in which we've seen Chris Fowler give his voice recordings. And at the end of the day, someone will always complain about the gameplay. No matter how good it is for others, there will always be someone who points out the flaws. Now, I can forgive some aspects of how the game plays, and I do mean only some, as long as I can be fully immersed in my Dynasty or my road to glory. But these next few things can absolutely kill the immersion factor if they aren't addressed. So I'm kind of going to go over these in the order in which I think are the things that I'm least worried about being an issue, to where I think these are some things that won't get addressed properly. Now let's kick it off with something that has already been confirmed, or what I would say is one of my bigger issues that's already been addressed, and that being the unrealistic records and rankings within a dynasty. So EA has already come out and confirmed that they have taken into consideration team history, and schools like the military academies won't just magically become number one ranked team in the nation, competing for national championships year in and year out. I'm glad to see the team at EA is taking into consideration a lot of the frustrations that we had as players over the last decade of schools that shouldn't be good are good within 4 seasons, but it was mostly because of the style of offense that they ran, not necessarily that the recruits that they were getting in. And since they've already answered that question for us, I don't need to spend a whole lot of time on it. Another thing that they kind of gave us a little bit of insight into, just based on what we saw in the first teaser trailer, would be a lackluster college football atmosphere. And just like the first game that really introduced a lot of the college football traditions in it with NCAA football 12, you could see in that first teaser trailer them adding some of those elements, like the Notre Dame players coming out the locker room touching the sign, them rubbing the gator head in Florida. Those huge game day traditions have already kind of been addressed, so I trust the team to be able to get that right again. But I want to see them kind of take it up a notch and make us feel like we're really involved in all of those pregame festivities and activities. And something I've always been kind of interested in is them showcasing tailgating activities. Like, I know there's a few schools, I believe it's Tennessee, UW, and Baylor, all have tailgating parties in boats because of the close proximity to the school stadium to water. I would really like to see them implement something like that, go out and capture that essence of game day and put that into the game. And also, one of my favorite things being an Ohio State fan is during the week of the game, all the streets in Ohio, they go through and they put their red tape across. They cross out all the letter M's all over the street signs, buildings, different things in the city, and it really gets everybody in the mood and letting them know, like, hey, this isn't. We don't rock with them. This is all about business. Let's go ahead and get this. Let's go and get this win. Take care of this thing. I would like to see them, take the next step and even cover stuff like that with other rivalries in this game. And then speaking of atmosphere too, I really want to see them go all out and show some love for senior day representation. We get so invested in our dynasty modes and the players that we have to where I feel like I have real deal relationships with these players on my team. I want their last home game to really create this sense of emotion that, hey, I'm losing this player. I'm no longer being able to play with this guy. Now, I know that may be a little bit on the excessive side of things, wherein they might not want to go through and have to randomly generate parents for each one of these players that are going to be on the field to where, they come out and they bring them the flowers. But even if they can find another way to make that game special, that would be really cool in my opinion. And in the same way I would like to see some senior day representation, I really would like to see them improve the homecoming game experience. That's really big for a lot of schools where you have a lot of your alumni from the past coming in, and a lot of times teams tend to schedule that easier opponent so they can pretty much guarantee a win on that game. Is to not really upset the crowd, but also just being able to play spoiler to somebody's homecoming game is also amazing too. So just general improvements around, special event games like that would really be nice to see as far as keeping us immersed in our dynasty experience and even the road to glory too. Next up will be a lack of emotion. Anytime there's like an upset or a big win, the players and the coach models and the crowd don't really seem to do justice to what I feel when I overcome an opponent that I was not supposed to beat that week. It just seems like there's just a general lack of excitement around an upset victory, or a general lack of emotional distraught over being upset by an opponent that you were supposed to beat. Those are things that really should feel authentic. Like an upset, whether you win or you lose, should feel like an upset. There should be appropriate commentary around those things too. And in that same vein, the appropriate celebration for winning a bowl game, winning a championship. That dry reaction that the previous generation games and even Madden to this day still has, over winning a championship, just doesn't cut it for me. It just doesn't feel like you accomplished what you actually set out to accomplish that season. Like the end of game reaction almost feels just like another game, with a little extra jumping around. They had the confetti and everything like that too, but it doesn't give that level of excitement or defeat that you should feel in a situation like that. Now, something that I would love to see, but I highly doubt they'll do it just because of the negative connotation that is associated with it and how the schools get fined, and that would be rushing the field. There were a few games last year in real life college football where the games came down to the wire. The Colorado State game for one, and that Oregon-Washington game was another one, where those were situations where when those teams won, that felt like the appropriate time to rush the field. Even though I know the schools don't like it and they get fined anytime it happens. But if any time as an organization that's going to happen, it's in a game like that. Now with the NCAA not being a part of this, I feel as though this is probably the best chance that we'll ever have to be able to get this in the game. But ultimately, a lot of times the schools do have that say so on whether or not something like that gets put in, and we may not get it. But if they put it in there, that really would up the emotion factor that I talked about previously tenfold, if not more than that. Up next, we have is There's not enough variety in the default game faces that we have available to us. I felt like there was a good mix for coaches in the game, but then again, you only have one coach that the game face actually mattered for. Because in NCAA 14, even though you were an offensive or defensive coordinator, on the sidelines during the game, it would only ever pan to the head coach. So you didn't see a whole lot of repetitive faces in that aspect. But the players, however, it was super annoying with the limitations that we had on that, where I would see sometimes 4 and 5 players with the same game face. Now, I think having licensed players in the game is going to help this, because even though they're not doing face scans, I believe what they were going to do is they were going to send headshots of every player, and they were going to generate a bunch of random faces based on those headshots that they received. So fingers crossed that they actually take care of that this time around. But I really want to see them get rid of a lot of the bad game faces too. There's one in particular in Madden. It's like an old man face, and you would have rookies come in with that face. I'm like, nah, get that out of here. We don't need that. That's not supposed to be there. It just really killed whatever kind of immersion factor I had anytime I would see that on a player coming in. So now something that we really need, that I hope we get back, is a modern redshirt system. A few years back, they started allowing incoming freshmen to play 4 games of that season before even if they were redshirting. And that would give us a lot of intel on how some of our incoming freshmen would fit in our teams without having to burn a year of eligibility. And I've had games where I was playing and I was blowing someone out, and I was like, dang, I really want to put one of my freshmen in that I've already given a red shirt to, but at that point it would be pointless because it would void that red shirt. Or I've had an injury in a game in a key spot, because I personally always run multiple running backs in the same game, and I'll have one of my front guys go out, and I'm like, dang, now I can't put that freshman in, or else I'm losing that, or I'm using that red shirt spot, or I'm using up his red shirt. And speaking of injuries, something we haven't had in this game since I believe PS2 era NCAA football is medical red shirts. And nowadays in college football, we're seeing 6, 7, 8 year seniors, which I really don't want it to get to that point to where we have guys that are sticking around for that long. I think at most we should be able to see guys with 6 years of eligibility because of an injury, but we need that medical red shirt back, because there have been plenty of instances where guys would get hurt early on in their career and even have to some extent switch schools in order to really benefit from their eligibility and get a look at playing in the league. Michael Penix was an absolute dog in Indiana, but due to getting hurt earlier on in his career, is now 25 going into the NFL. But if it wasn't for his medical red shirts at Indiana, he wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to go on to Washington and become the player that he is now. So even if we don't get the 4-game limit red shirts, we absolutely need the medical red shirts to come back. And I would like to see us be able to give a player at least 2 of them. Anything more than that I think is extreme, but at least 2 would be ideal. Now let's talk about College Game Day. I know we've already got confirmation of the crew being included in the game. Desmond Howard, Reese Davis, David Pollock, even though he's not with ESPN anymore, and others. I don't want this to be a half-baked experience. What I would really like for this to look like is exactly what 2K does with Ernie, Shaq, and Kenny. Give me a fully 3D rendered game day crew on campus each week. And I want it to move around to different campuses too. And I've seen somewhere where EA's been collecting assets from all of the different schools. I'm hoping that they plan on using some of that stuff in the pregame festivities, but also in a game day like atmosphere, where these guys are moving to different schools each week. And I don't want it to be, just the school that I'm playing at. Have it be a nationally televised ESPN game, a matchup that's been predetermined at the beginning of the season. And I want a lot of different variation and conversation when it comes up. I don't want to hear just about my game that I'm playing. I want to hear about other games that are happening around the country. Now this one is huge for me, and that is the awards consideration algorithm, but more specifically, true athletes not getting Heisman votes. And I remember this vividly. One of the most egregious snubs in my entire time playing an NCAA football game, going all the way back to NCAA 06. I had a recruit that I brought in. He was a 4-star athlete. Name was Justin Smith. I'll never forget it. The kid was 6'4", 220 pounds. And once I was able to sign him, his stats equaled out to where he could play quarterback, receiver, or DB. I don't remember exactly what his speed rating was, but he was fast enough to where he could have been Cam Newton light. But the conundrum I had was that I already had a deep DB room. I had signed a good receiver class, so I didn't want to make his permanent move over to receiver, even though he would have still been close to the top of the depth chart. But I had really wanted to use that receiving class that I had brought in, so I ended up putting him as QB. Now his ratings were good enough to where he ended up being QB2, but I had another guy that could have been in front of him just due to seniority. But that was one of my biggest gripes with the old system on 14 was you had to designate a position for all of your athletes coming in. You could not just leave them in that athlete position and just put them wherever you want in the depth chart, which more on that in a little bit. But anyway, he's my backup quarterback. And then 2 games in, one of my starting receivers goes down and it's broken collarbone. He's out for the rest of the season. And all of those receivers that I brought in that class, I ended up redshirting just so I could say the eligibility. So I said, okay, let me move Jay Smith over to receiver on the depth chart, but he's still listed as a quarterback in the game. And when I tell you I cooked with this man, I mean, like, just like Percy Harvin, put the ball in his hand and watch some magic happen. Buddy finished his freshman season with 1,048 receiving yards. I had this written down, and 12 touchdowns, 562 rushing yards with 8 touchdowns, and 2,154 passing yards with 14 touchdowns. He did not get a single Heisman vote. In hindsight, just because I'm making this argument right now, I should have wrote down the stats of the other guys that actually got votes and who ended up winning it that season, but I was pissed. So yeah, they need to really retool on how Heisman votes get allocated in this game. That's going to be huge, especially when you have a guy like Travis Hunter that's playing on defense and offense. So yeah, please EA, fix that. Let's talk about depth chart AI. If I'm beating a team by more than 3 scores, the computer should automatically sub in my bench players. I shouldn't have to go in and manually put in my second and third string players. That should be automatic. And I feel as though there was a game at one time that had an option to quick sub all of your second and third string players into a game. It might have been a Madden, but I don't quite remember. So I can't tell you exactly which one it was, but I clearly remember that being a feature in the previous game. Because nothing would piss me off more and then when I'm playing somebody and I'm up multiple scores. Now part of this is on me, but if I'm up multiple scores and one of my starters gets hurt and it's a season-ending injury, the computer should automatically know, hey, this is getting out of hand. Just do the auto subs. It should be fine. And if I want to be the idiot and put my starters back in that same game, maybe I'm trying to break a record or something like that, let me make that decision for myself versus a situation where it's running on Super Sim because the game has gotten so far out of hand that during the Super Sim portion, one of my starters gets hurt. That also pisses me off. And a quick aside on Super Sim, fix that. The sim stats would get way too crazy whenever you super simmed in the middle of a game. No matter what my presets were as far as chewing the clock, ball control, things like that, the numbers would just look outrageous at the end of a game. And then give me less limitations on what players I can place in any position. I get it. It would look goofy for me to put a D end in at running back, but at the same time, let me do that if I want to. But there was a dude that used to play for Baylor, Laquan McGowan. played defensive line, offensive line, and tight end for Baylor. It looked hilarious with him out there, but at the same time, I thought it was dope that he had the hands to be able to go out and play a position like that and would catch passes, scoring touchdowns, all kind of crazy stuff. It was just a fun story to see that you had this 400-pound guy out there catching passes as a tight end. So let me do stuff like that. And while on the subject of depth chart, I do want to talk about revamping position names. I don't want to have to designate a linebacker or one of my ends as left or right. What I would much prefer to be able to do is name a weak side and a strong side linebacker. This also needs to be addressed in Madden as well. But I want to be able to set my linebackers and my ends as weak side or strong side, because there may be a specific linebacker that I want on the side of the tight end that's a little bit better in coverage, because I know the setting is already there to where the defense will auto flip based on the play that the offense selects or the formation that the offense goes out in. So the logic is there. Now, if I were able to, but that pretty much only applies to, I believe, like your nickel corners or what gaps that your defensive linemen line up in. But in that same vein of alignments, if I'm running a 4-3 defense one year and I decide we end up getting a new defensive coordinator and I decide I want to change our playbook to match whatever that D coordinator does, and let's just say we're going to a 3-4, instead of me forcing my defensive ends to change position, like manually changing their position in the off season, change that terminology to edge. Because some guys, even though I'm in a 4-3 and we switch to a 3-4, I still want them to be an edge rusher, but I don't necessarily want them going out and covering pass plays. And this is where it's going to get really technical, and I don't absolutely need this. This is more or less a nice to have. But designating defensive lineman positions as 3 techniques and 5 techniques. Like I said, super minute, super niche, just a nice to have, not necessarily a gots to have. But this receiver one is absolutely a got to have. I don't want to have to set them as receiver 1, receiver 2, receiver 3. I think that's stupid. Doesn't make any sense, especially when calling specific plays. Allow me to designate the X, the Z, the Y in the slot, and even H-back and wing backs for those offenses that have those positions. A big thing in the Urban Meyer offense back with Tim Tebow and them at Florida, Percy Harvin played the H-back, which for Urban, that was one of the most important positions on the field, was H-back. But yeah, let me put my bigger, more physical receiver at the X to where I know he can beat press coverage using physicality, not necessarily with speed. Or even if he was a faster receiver, let me put him at X. So that way I know anytime he had press man, he could beat that DB with speed. Or you can get my smaller, shifty guy and put him at Z. And on that same note, let me designate a corner that shadows my X receiver or my number 1 receiver. No matter where he goes on the field, that number 1 corner or that shadow corner is going to follow him on no matter where he lines up. Ultimately, what I'm asking for is more control over position designation and more football relevant terms and terminology for the positions on the field. I know the goal is to always make it simpler, more user friendly, easy to understand, but the goal should also be creating smarter football fans, and even someone that's new to the series is educated enough to understand how football is played in the positions that they play in. And then we have X factors. We don't need them. Point blank, period. No superpowers. If y'all want to put it in Madden, that's fine. Keep that in Madden. I don't want it in college football game. Impact players was fine. It made sense. Higher overall player can sometimes make a game-breaking play. That's cool. And then lastly, I know I can't be the only person that this bothers, but conference patches not updating anytime you realign conferences. This is one of those things, based on what I saw in the trailer, I don't think that this is going to get fixed or addressed in this first year, but please, in the next year, try to do something about it, because from the models and jersey scans that I saw them putting in, it looks as though it's still going to be attached to the jersey 3D model itself. But it absolutely messes with my mind anytime I move schools around and I still see them wearing the old conference patch on the jerseys and highlights and things like that. I'm a person that, in order to spice things up over the years, sometimes I create crazy custom conferences. Like I have one where it's specifically region based. You have schools within a reasonable drive or flight to all the other schools in their conferences, and it looks nothing like what the current landscape looks like, but it always messes with me when I see that. So please, even if it's this year, if it's in there and I'm surprised, I'll be glad, I'll be happy, I'll be shocked, but I'll still be happy about it. But in future iterations of this game, please make that a separate asset. I know that it's possible because they do that now when it comes to the bowl game patches and the championship patches. But yeah, please make that change. And again, by no means am I saying that the game will be unplayable if all of this stuff isn't included, but it would definitely affect how accurate of a representation of real life college football it is. And whatever is missed in this first iteration of the game, hopefully can be added in the future editions of it. But I would love to know what you guys think could be some immersion breaking factors in this game. So please leave those down in the comment section below. And if you enjoy this type of content and would like to see more of it in the future, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't have to miss out. Stay blessed, y'all. I'm out of here.